London, the greatest city the world has ever known. A great metropolis and a great port, a centre of learning, law and culture, and the meeting place of a commonwealth of nations. Pre-war London, a city of 8.5 million citizens where they lived and worked and played. Then war, total war, came to London. The target was everything and everybody. But as they set about the job of clearing up the wreckage, the people of London began to see their city with new eyes, and they began asking themselves questions.
Well, was the old London all that it should have been?
Must we always have slums, and an East End and a West End? 3 people killed in the streets every day.
Parks and gardens in some parts.
And in other parts, only the streets for us kids to play in.
Perhaps we've taken it all for granted too long, and here is our chance to do something about it.
Yes, and we were thinking that at the London County Council, too. Like you, we saw beyond all the suffering and destruction a great opportunity to build a new London, a better, finer, more spacious city than the old. It's our job to carry out the wishes of London's people. And so, in 1941, we asked our architects to prepare a plan that would bring a new order and dignity to the whole of the County of London. But first of all, we had to find out everything about this great city we were planning to rebuild. Everything about its history and its geography, its people, and the way they live. We had to find out how much of it had been totally destroyed and how much of it was in such a bad state that it would have to be rebuilt anyway. And that didn't just mean the bombed buildings, but all those condemned and obsolete houses that we had begun to get rid of in the years before the war. Then we had to learn what the people were thinking, what they felt should be done about it all, and what they wanted. We had to know what sort of homes they lived in, and how and where they spent their leisure hours. And then we had to find out all about London's traffic. We needed to know how many trams, motor cars, lorries, and buses passed through the streets, and at what times, and how long it took people to get to and from their work every day, and where they worked, and under what sort of conditions. And we had to know all about the state of the people's health, what the mortality rate was, and how many new Londoners were being born in the county year by year. In fact, everything that affected the lives of Londoners, past, present, and future, had to be taken into consideration in our plans. We'd like Londoners to see more of the river than they do at present. It's nearly all shut in by commerce and industry, and so on.
Well, there's very good reason for that, you know. The Thames is our chief artery of overseas trade.
Oh, we realise that, of course.
No doubt some tie-in that could be done, and more access given to the riverfront. But in the view of the Port and London Authority, trade considerations must come first.
We'd like to have the views of the water board as soon as possible.
As a matter of fact, our report's on its way to you today. I don't think there are any serious difficulties. 1 or 2 minor points. There's the question of booster pumps for those high buildings and flats. That would have to be the owner's responsibility.
County Hall want figures and details of street accidents and traffic density in London, sir. They want it for the plan they are getting out.
Yes, that's right. I've had several talks with them already about it. This is a great opportunity to improve traffic conditions, and we must give them all the help we can.
Speaking on behalf of the factory owners of this district, we should welcome any scheme that would enable our employees to live closer to their work. But at the same time, view with alarm any attempt to interfere with our rights to develop our...
How does all this fit in with your council's ideas for rebuilding the borough?
Well, naturally it raises the old question of whether it's to be houses or flats. But apart from that, it does look as if it'll give us the elbow room we've been wanting for years.
It wasn't until all this information had been collected and the results tabulated and put into records that we could begin to see the broad outlines of the task before us, and our architects could get to work on their first designs for the new London. Thousands of maps were made, hundreds of charts drawn, discarded, revised, and done again, until at last we were ready with a complete plan to put before the government and the people of London. This work was under the direction of Mr. J.H. Forshaw, architect to the London County Council, and Sir Patrick Abercrombie of University College, the world-famous British authority on town planning, who is planning advisor also to Plymouth, Hull, Bath, and many other regional and urban authorities.
Here in this book is a plan for the County of London. It isn't a hard and fast blueprint. Our plan is an idea, a plan for something that is living, something that is growing.
Yes, it's rather like the way you plan a garden. You've got to give the plants air and sunshine, and then also you've got to give them shelter from wet and cold, and they've got to have room to grow. And I tell you what, there mustn't be any overcrowding. There must be change, always change, as one season or one generation follows another.
A city exists because men have realized that by living together they can enjoy many advantages. And it was this idea, the idea of people living in communities, that has formed the basis of our plans.
London, of course, used to be a collection of scattered village communities. Only 200 years ago, the central core was quite small. Round it were the villages, each living its own community life, and each surrounded by open country.
But as London grew, the villages grew also, and spread closer and closer together until they joined up in one huge and tidy sprawl, which is London as we know it today.
You see, the trouble is that London grew up without any plan or order. That's why there are all those bad and ugly things that we hope to do away with if this plan of ours is carried out.
Yes, when you come to look at London, it's an amazing mixture of good and bad, of beautiful and ugly.
It's a mixture, all right. Mile upon mile without an open space, where houses and factories, pubs, schools and churches are all jumbled up together in a hopeless confusion.
And then in other parts, fine spacious parks and public gardens. London has many fine and noble buildings, buildings of which any city might well be proud. Here are some of the finest works of the great Sir Christopher Wren, the magnificent Naval College at Greenwich, and the equally dignified Pensioners' Hospital at Chelsea, as well as St. Paul's Cathedral and a host of smaller churches and houses.
Look again, and you will see mean, hideous slums of which any city ought to be ashamed. Row upon row of dirty, dismal houses that should have been pulled down and done away with long ago. Homes without any proper sanitation, where every drop of water has to be carried up and down the stairs in buckets. And the only place for the cooking stove is on the stairway landing. Homes where whole families live, eat and sleep all together in one room, and the children have nowhere but the back alleys to play in.
But we mustn't forget that there has been some good planning in the past. You can see that in London's many beautiful squares and elegant terraces. Not only the grand ones laid out by John Nash, but also all those humbler squares and streets built about the beginning of the last century, which are found in districts like Clerkenwell and parts of Islington and Bow. These good things we must do our best to keep.
But what about all those homes in the shadow of railway viaducts, where the people can't rest or sleep for the smoke and the din? And those blocks of offices and flats built right alongside factories, without air or sunlight or room to breathe. All these bad things must go, and the sooner the better.
Some of them were beginning to go, of course, even before the war. But what was being done then was scattered and piecemeal. And this time, we've got to tackle the problem in an altogether bigger way.
Then there's the problem of London's streets. London has busy shopping centres, great markets, and a theatre land which attracts visitors from all over the country. But to serve these, an out-of-date street system which is quite unable to cope with the 20th century traffic. So there are endless hold-ups and many valuable hours wasted every day in trying to get from one part of the city to another.
London has a great asset in the Thames, a noble river, bordered in some places by fine embankments, which open up with wide vistas for the enjoyment of the people. But for most of its length, it is shut off behind tall warehouses, factories and wharves. Now, if these were to be regrouped and arranged more compactly, whole new stretches of the riverfront could be opened to the public. Lastly, let's look at London's outskirts, that ragged boundary where Greater London merges into the open country. It is true that we have tried to preserve the amenities of the countryside in the open spaces of the green belt, and that is a step in the right direction.
But at the same time, we have allowed uncontrolled ribbon development. Housing estates and factories have sprung up all along the main roads and railways leading outwards from the city, reaching far into what should have remained open fields and woodlands. But in spite of all the muddle and confusion, the lack of order or design, one very important thing we discovered when we made our survey, and that is the spirit of the old village communities has somehow survived.
Yes, I don't think there's any doubt about that. The old local loyalties are still there. It's that loyalty and neighbourliness which holds a group of people together because they have the same interests and pleasures, and because they share their troubles and their triumphs.
Yes, the spirit of the communities is still there. The trouble is their boundaries have got blurred and lost in London's untidy sprawl.
It seemed to us that a solution of the problem lay in the replanning of these communities, keeping what was good and replacing what was bad.
It's a pretty gigantic scheme affecting the future of the whole of London. But big problems call for big solutions, and there are parts of London where rebuilding can start right away.
As soon as labour and materials are available, we must be ready to make a start. The broad plan is complete, but it mustn't just stay in a book. It must be translated into action, and that's what our architects are working on now.
Well, let's deal with the worst places first. Some of the areas in most urgent need of attention are the industrial boroughs in the east and south of London. Even before the Blitz, reconstruction here was long overdue. I mean places like Bermondsey, Southwark and Lambeth on the south bank, and Poplar and Stepney on the north. Let's take a closer look at one of them. Here's a photograph of Stepney, and it tells the usual story. There's an almost complete lack of open space. Houses are out of date and jammed in between railways and roads. Schools have hardly any playgrounds and are much too near factories and industry. And there are tenements built right alongside wharves and warehouses. It's a typical picture of muddle and overcrowding, which clearly calls for drastic reconstruction. First, let's look at the roads as they are now. The streets are narrow and winding. Then, let's see where commerce and industry are. You see, scattered all over the place. With the roads, what we propose is one or two wider, straight, principal streets with smaller local service roads. With commerce and industry, our idea is to draw the scattered factories into groups near the main roads. Then the remaining space would be divided into 3 social units. Each of these neighborhoods would have a population of 6,000 to 10,000 people, which would give the right number of children for a junior school. So the schools become, in effect, the centres around which the neighbourhood units are built up. Now, over here is a model of the same area, as it would look if our ideas were carried out. First, let's look at one of the neighbourhoods and see how that's arranged. Here, near the centre, is the junior school. The people would live in streets or squares of terraced houses, each with its own private garden, or in blocks of flats, also standing in their own grounds. Then there would be local shopping centres to serve the housewives' day-to-day needs, and open spaces where the children can play. And finally, down here near the boundary would be a trading estate where many of the people living in the district would work. Well, that's how one neighbourhood would be laid out, but each neighbourhood must link up with all the others in the same community. So here are wide tree-lined roads leading inwards to the centre of this group of neighbourhoods. And here are the public buildings, the civic centre, a library, a health clinic, a big concert hall, the fire station, a cinema, a central shopping area for the largest stores, a main hospital with its medical school. So you see, the whole community is contained within the natural boundaries. That's the main roads, the river, the docks, the canal, and the industries. And the result of all this would be all the essentials for living, playing, and working under decent conditions, near at home, and plenty of light, air, and space for everyone. So it's not an inhuman plan at all, but one that is designed to make life better and pleasanter for all of us. And just as the neighbourhoods must link up into one community, so all the communities must link up with the others all over London. Of course, the City of London in the centre and Greater London outside don't come within our County of London plan, but their plans and ours must be made to fit. And that brings us to another aspect of London. London as a machine, a vast machine whose arteries are the lines of communication. With regard to roads, our chief aim must be to separate fast, long-distance traffic from local traffic. And the idea is to have 9 arterial roads for fast traffic leading into London. These would join a main ring road, which would keep the through traffic out of the central area. There would also be 2 main roads across the centre of the city. All the main arterial roads should have at least 6 traffic ways, and wherever possible, they should be planted with wide grass borders and avenues of trees. Full use would be made of bridges, flyovers, and tunnels, so as to have as few crossings and side entrances as possible. But when we came to examine the railways, we found the position complicated by the fact that they have been developed by 10 or more competing companies, all trying to reach the centre quickly. Most of the main stations are out of date. and some are very badly placed. And the miles of viaducts occupy many acres of valuable ground, as well as having a most depressing effect on the streets around. If all the trains coming into London were electrified and taken underground as they approach the central area, land would be freed for other uses, and a lot of noise and smoke would disappear. And so would some of the unsightly bridges which at present mar the river scene. In fact, it's pretty clear that a general tidying up of the present rail system is needed. All this is part of London the machine. But there is another and an important aspect of London's life. London the metropolis, the capital city. Most of you will know that part of the river which stretches between Westminster and the city. On the north bank there are government buildings, large office blocks, and a fine embankment with trees and gardens. But on the south bank there is a confusion of warehouses, slums, and derelict streets. And the mess is even worse since the Blitz. Here is a splendid opportunity to improve London by creating a new riverfront worthy of its position in the heart of the capital.
But we mustn't forget that this plan is at present only something on paper, drawn up for the London County Council. Is it going to be made a reality? Will London be recreated on modern lines worthy of her long history? Here is Lord Latham, the leader of the London County Council, to say something about that.
Well, that's the plan the architects have drawn up for the London of the future, your London. This is perhaps the greatest challenge to her pride, her courage, her vitality that London has ever had. And what we want to know now is, what do you, the people of London, think about it?
Will this mean that some of us have got to move, then?
Yes, I'm afraid some of you will have to move. You see, we must reduce the number of people and industries in the congested areas if everyone is to be decently housed, with plenty of open space for rest and play.
Cole, just think of having proper playing fields for all the kids. Seems like a dream to me.
That is why we want you to think about this plan, to talk it over among yourselves, and then to let us have your ideas about it.
It sounds fine, but who's going to pay for it all? I should think it would cost millions and millions.
Yes, it will certainly cost a great deal of money, but not more than unplanned building, and a lot less than war. In a way, you know, this is London's war, against decay and dirt and inefficiency. And in the long run, plans such as this is the cheapest way to fight those enemies. What a grand opportunity it is. If we miss this chance to rebuild London, we shall have missed one of the great moments of history. We shall have shown ourselves unworthy of our victory. So let's start now to rebuild London, where everyone can live a full, a happy, and a healthy life. A London her citizens can be proud of.